Okay, the recording is now on and we're going to get started. Today is Monday, September the 26th. This is our class number 3. To start our class this morning, I've got a little devotional thought for us found in the book of Acts, chapter 5, verse 29. There's an interesting little story in here. It turns out that, Peter was considered to be a rabble-rouser. This is after the death and resurrection of the Savior. And what did the Savior say? Very last thing, when he left his apostles on the mount, what's called the Mount of Ascension. He visited with them for 40 days and 40 nights, and he gave them instructions and told them everything what to do. And then he said, now I'm leaving, and this is my last command to you, my last exhortation. And what was it that he told them to do? Kennedy, you're the only one with an open microphone. Do you know the answer to the question?
Oh, my bad. No, I don't.
Okay. He said to them, the famous scripture that made you all missionaries, he said, go ye therefore into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. He gave them a command that they were to go out and preach the gospel. And so Peter went back to Jerusalem and he started preaching the gospel and started teaching people about the Savior. And who comes along but the police department? And the police department are, you remember, these are the officers of the government. These are the people who are authorized to use violence to force people to do what they tell them to do. And the idea was, you do what we tell you to do, or bad things are going to happen to you. And they came back to Peter and they said, what's up with this? We commanded you not to preach, not to teach, not to do anything in the name of this Jesus person that you're talking about. And what had Peter done? Peter had healed the man. They were going into the temple and they were going to talk to people in the temple and teach them about the Savior. And there was a man sitting there and he was begging because he was paralyzed in his legs. He couldn't walk all his life. And Peter said to him, silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I thee. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk. And he healed the man. The man jumped up and he was running and walking and leaping, and everybody could see. This was the man that was begging out in the front of the temple. And now look at him. He's walking. And this really, really tipped off the Sanhedrin. You know, those leaders of the Jews in the temple that had just a few weeks before crucified the Savior. And they saw, we thought this would put the end of it. We were not going to see any more of this Jesus trouble because we killed the man. And surely that will put people in their place. But here's Peter healing again, performing miracles. They sent the officers over there and the police officers said, we told you, you are not to preach in the name of this Jesus anymore. And in Acts chapter 5, verse 29, Peter gave them his answer. And the answer was, then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than man. In other words, he said, phooey on your authority, phooey on your violence. You can do whatever you want to me. I am not going to obey you. I'm going to obey God that commanded me to preach the gospel to every kindred, nation, tongue, and people. And I am going to do it, and you can stop me if you want to. You can throw me in jail, but I'm going to go in and preach the gospel. And that's exactly what he did later on. Remember, Paul got thrown in jail, and he preached the gospel to the jailer and converted him, and the guy let him go free. So that is an interesting statement on the conflict between commandments of God and the commandments of men. And the rule is, if God commands you to do something and the state or the government commands you to do something contrary to that, who should you obey? What do you think, Dylan? Since you're the only one with your microphone open now.
God.
We should obey God rather than man. Sometimes that's a tough choice for people to make. All right. Food for thought. Put that in your notes. Let's turn now to our quiz from last week. Quiz number 2. And we're going to go through it quickly and give you a chance to score your quiz. I am still missing a couple of quizzes from last week. Quiz number 1 has not been turned in by everyone. I hope you will quickly repent if you are in that category. Okay, book number 1 from reading up to page 21 in the book of, or quiz number 2 from reading up to page 21 in the law. But before that, this first question, question number 1, comes from the discussion we had about ownership. Question, Kennedy?
Yes. So you're supposed to email the test or the quiz in after we're done with it?
Yes. After we correct it today, then you're supposed to send it to me. We did quiz number 1 last week, and everybody got it corrected, and then they sent it to me.
Hey.
All right. So after class today, then I want you to scan it and send it to me in email. Carson, question?
Can I just give you my test?
Yes, but I want you to score it. I want you to write the score at the top of the quiz. There's a line that says score, and there should be a number on that line, which is a percentage of your correct answers. Okay?
Okay.
You got the quiz this week, right? You got it printed out? You were able to?
Yeah.
Okay, it looks good.
Yeah.
You know, the reason that you want to just scan the quiz and send it in to me is that you get to keep the original. And you keep the original and you put it in your permanent binder of things I need to know for the rest of my life about the government. Okay?
Okay.
That's going to be a very, very handy thing for you to keep when you're 35 years old and some issue comes up and you say, oh, I better go check what my book from Brother Flukiger has to say about that. Okay, question number 1 about ownership. I'm going to go around the room and we're going to start with Ningyan. Which of the following are characteristics of ownership? Circle all correct answers.
A, B, and C.
A, B, and C is correct. How about D?
And E.
D is also correct. And E is also correct. Any others? Carson?
All of them?
All of the above is correct. That's
Okay.
right. Okay? The idea of ownership is control. I totally control. That means I don't let anybody else use it if I don't want to. That's A. That means if somebody wants to use it, they have to ask permission. We talked about this when you want to borrow the keys to the car from your dad. C, if I want to charge somebody to use my property, I can do that if I own it. Yes. D, deciding when and how to dispose of a property. If I want to give it away, if I want to break it, if I want to do whatever to it, I can choose to do that if I own it, right? Okay, that's D. E, exercising control. We've talked about that. F, the liability for damage of property. If you have a property that causes damage, like for example, suppose you have a dog and your dog goes out and kills the neighbor's sheep.
That'll be funny.
Whose responsibility is it? Is it the dog's fault? Is a dog a thing to be acted or a thing to be acted upon?
Acted upon.
It's a thing to be acted upon. So who bears the responsibility for the action of that dog?
The owner.
The owner of the dog. So liability for the property you own goes back to the owner. What about if you own a tree and your tree grows over the side of your property and drops apples on your neighbor's grass? And your neighbor comes to you and says, your tree is making a mess of my lawn and I don't like that anymore. Whose responsibility is it?
Yours.
You are the owner of the tree. You have the liability for the damage that your property causes to other people. Okay? That's F. G, gifting a property. If I want to give you a gift, I have to own a gift before I can give you a gift, right? Yes, that's a distinction of ownership. How about H, restricting uses of a property? If I say, you can use my property, but only in this way or only for these purposes. When you go to rent a truck from U-Haul and you say, I have some stuff I want to move, they make you sign a contract. And in that contract, there's a list of the things that you're allowed to use that truck for. And there's also a list of things that you're not allowed to use that truck for. And if you're going to pay U-Haul money and use their truck, they have the right to tell you what you cannot use their truck for. Does anybody know some of the things you can't use a U-Haul truck for?
Muddy.
You can't get it muddy. No, they don't care if you get it muddy as long as it's not muddy when you bring it back. It's totally clean. Yes, and they can dictate to that. They can say, if you make it muddy, we're going to charge you more money. Any other ideas? They say, you cannot use my truck for a truck bomb. You know what a truck bomb is? It's when you load the back up filled with fertilizer and you go drive it into the Washington Monument to try to knock it down. They said specifically, you may not use my truck for a truck bomb. And if you are going to use my truck bomb, you have to charge extra and sign this initial over here. No, they don't do that. They just say it's completely against the rules for you to use my truck for a truck bomb. And there's other things. They say you cannot use my truck for anything that's illegal. You cannot use my truck for transporting stuff that is going to blow up, like acetylene or cylinders or explosive dynamite or stuff like that. Okay, that's in there. If you ever rent a truck, when you get old enough to rent a truck, you can read the fine print, and it'll tell you all those things you can't do. Okay, that is one of the properties or characteristics of ownership. Now, what about deciding the value of the property? If I decide that my house is worth a certain number, and somebody else comes along and says to me, "I want to buy your house," and they offer me a number that's less than the number I think, do I have to say, "Okay, I'll sell it to you"? No, I don't. I can decide the number that I want to set on my property. Now, there's a very important or very interesting aspect to this whole idea of ownership that I want to discuss just briefly. And this has to do with property taxes. Do all of you understand what a property tax is? How does it work? How do property taxes work? Anybody answer me about that? None of you own any property that you have to pay tax on?
Aren't you just taxed on your property? The more property you have, the more property tax you have.
Okay, so you own a house or you own a farm, and the government comes around and says, this is how much your property is worth, this is how much your house is worth, and based on how much your house is worth, you owe us money. Okay, they say you owe us $2,000 a year you have to pay us because you own your house. Okay? In that example, who has set the value on your house and taxes you for it?
The government.
The government, okay? And suppose they say your house is worth $100,000 and you go in and say, my house isn't worth $100,000. There's no way I could sell my house for that much. My house is only worth $80,000. What does the government say?
That's too bad.
Yeah, usually they say that's too bad. They do have a formal appeals procedure when you can supposedly go in and try to convince them that their number is wrong. But basically, they have the authority to say what the number is, and then they charge you. Okay? So, now let me ask you this question. Suppose you have a house, and you say, I have this great idea. I'm going to turn my house into a manufacturing company. I am going to just set up, I got this great idea for a business, and I'm just going to move out of my house and change my house into a factory. And it's going to be a little factory right here on my street. And the government comes around and says what? Kennedy?
No.
The government says what? You can't make your house into a factory. Your house is a house. You can live in your house, but you can't make your house into a factory. So who is exercising a characteristic of ownership on your house if they tell you what you can and cannot do with your house?
The government.
The government is telling you. Okay, suppose you have a farm and you decided, okay, I got this farm, but it turns out right now that instead of growing hay, I could make a lot more money if I grew pigs, because pigs are just the in thing right now. there's bacon on everybody's hamburgers, and they need more bacon. So I'm going to start growing pigs. Can the government come around and say to you, no pigs on that farm, you're only growing crops? Stoker kids, what's the answer to that question?
Can.
They can tell you that on your very own farm? Then don't you say, well, wait a minute, this is my farm. Can I grow whatever I want to grow? And they say, no, you can't grow whatever you want to grow. It may be your farm, but we get to tell you what you can do with it. So who's exercising the characteristics of ownership?
The government.
The government is, okay? You know that there's some places that if you own your house for, say, 50 years, suppose you're just really a stable person and you like to stay right where you are. And you stay there your whole life and you live there 50 years for your whole life. You know that the government is charging that person every year for 50 years or 100 years. They're going to make you pay them, and sometimes the amount of money you have to pay the government to keep your house is more than the amount you paid to buy your house. And when that happens, do you begin to get the idea that you're just paying rent? The government charges you for living in your house. If you don't want to pay the taxes, what does the government do? Ethan, what does the government do if you don't pay your taxes on your house?
They a big deal or whatever. Do they put you in jail?
They won't put you in jail. They'll just take your house away. They'll come around and say, hey, you didn't pay your taxes. Guess what? This is not your house anymore. This is our house. And now we're going to sell it to somebody so that we can get our tax money out of you. Okay? So, how do you like that, living in the land of the free and the home of the brave, that you cannot really own your property? You can think you own it. The government lets you think you own your property, but when it comes right down to you, they tell you how much it's worth. They tell you what you can do with it. They tell you how much you're going to have to pay them for the rest of your life if you want to keep that thing. Land of the free and the home of the brave. Well, I have a list for you. And you're not going to be very impressed by this list, but I am going to show it to you just so you know that there exists such a thing. And all I have to do is find it. Yes, Carson?
Now back to the part where you said you wanted to make your house a factory, but the government said no. But what if you paid off your house? So would it truly be yours?
If you paid off your house, it doesn't matter. The government still can tell you what you can and cannot do with your property.
Okay, I just wanted.
And the reason why they say is because factories are noisy. There's a lot of traffic that comes in and out of factories, and sometimes they stink. And so we don't want you to make your neighbors angry. We want you to be a good neighbor, and therefore you can only do the things that all of your neighbors say you can do with your property. So they do it in the interest of what's called the public good. That raises another question. What is the public, and who gets to decide what is good for the public? Okay? What should happen is that if you own a property, you own a house, and you change your house into a factory, and as a result of changing your house into a factory, you cause some harm to your neighbors. Then your neighbors should be able to come to you and say, look, you have damaged me. You have ruined the value of my property because I used to have a nice, quiet little home on the street here, and you changed it into a thriving metropolis when there's all kinds of customers coming in here and trucks coming in here all the time, and now my house is only worth half as much as it used to be worth. Therefore, I am going to sue you to pay me the difference. I'm going to sell my house and I'm going to move someplace else where I don't have a goofy neighbor that wants to change his house into a Walmart. Okay? That's the way a resolution should be solved, is when your property damages somebody else, then they should be able to have a claim against you for the damage that you caused them. This is a list of all the countries in the world that have no property taxes. if you go to any of these countries and you buy a house, that house is yours forever and ever, and you don't have to pay anybody any money to keep it. Okay? Look who's leaning over to see that list. We've got in Europe, Croatia, Liechtenstein, Malta, and Monaco. Monaco is actually a very nice place to live. They have gambling casinos there, and there's a lot of freedom in Monaco. It's on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. So you can go there, you could buy a house, and you never have to pay the government another dime. In the Caribbean, you can go to the Cayman Islands. Cayman Islands is quite a nice place. They have sunshine and hurricanes. So then there's these countries in the Middle East, a couple of places out in the Indian Ocean, the Seychelles. So it's a very nice place. It's a chain of islands out in the Indian Ocean. And then over there down by New Zealand, the islands of Fiji and the Cook Islands, no property taxes. So if you want to get away without paying taxes anymore, you've got a couple of really nice choices. The only thing is, you may need to also buy an airplane so you can get home once in a while. Okay, all of that discussion was about question number 1. Now, we're going to go on to question number 2 from the law. And we're coming to Carson Hinckley for the answer to this one. Why can life, liberty, and property be considered as one inalienable right and not 3? What'd you come up with on that?
The collective organization of individual rights to defend oneself and have others help you out. We can join together to defend our life, liberty, and property.
Okay, all of that is a good definition of what the law is. That's what Bastiat says the law is. It's a collective organization of the right to exercise, to defend these life, liberty, and property. But that doesn't speak directly to the question, why are they one right and not 3 rights?
Okay.
So now anybody can say what they think.
Protection of one protects the rest.
Okay. So if I protect my life, I'm also protecting my liberty. What if I throw you in jail but don't kill you? You're still alive. I have not taken your life. I have only taken your liberty, and maybe I've taken your property, but you're still alive.
I wrote down that without one, the others do not exist.
Oh, Jaquel, that's a good answer. If you don't have one, you can't exercise the others. Here's another way to look at it. If you have property, how did you get property? If you have a house, how did you get it? You had to work for it, right? You had to pay somebody for it. You had to build it. You had to do something to come into possession of that property. So whatever it is that you had to do to get that property, you had to exercise your liberty. You had to use your liberty in order to get property. And on the contrary, you have to use your property to sustain your life. Okay, I got property now. I got a ham sandwich because I worked for it. I went into Walmart. I gave them money that I earned on my job, and I got a ham sandwich. Now what can I do with the ham sandwich? I can eat it, and now I'm going to survive for another day because I ate my ham sandwich. Okay, my property sustains my life. Okay, and of course, if you're not alive, you don't have any liberty because you're dead. You can't do anything. You're laying on the ground, and you can't even move your hand. You're dead. So you can't exercise your liberty, and of course, you can't defend or acquire any property because you're dead. Okay? So they all are so tight, closely tied together that they don't work without, they're all, I mean, I'm alive because I can do stuff, and because I can do stuff, I can have stuff. Okay? So that's why we say, yeah, we break them down to life, liberty, and property, but in essence, they're really only one right, which is the right to life. Okay? And by the way, when we talk about rights, one of the terms you sometimes hear we use is called inalienable rights, or unalienable rights. Actually, the modern correct term is inalienable, and back in Thomas Jefferson's time, they said unalienable, but today we say inalienable. And inalienable simply means it's a right that came to us from God. And that's what Bastiat said also. We have these rights to life, liberty, and property before there was any such thing as a government, before anybody decided that they had a monopoly on the use of force, where they could go around and take things away from people and not get in trouble for it because they were the law. They had a badge on their shirt, or they had a helmet or a hat on their head. They said the right to have your stuff comes to you from law. Okay, or not comes from law, it comes from God. Okay? And those are the rights that we call inalienable. All right, good answer to that question. Number 3, from the poems we talked about, I'm up to Adriana. Who is the master of the fate and the captain of the true Christian soul? Easy question.
Jesus Christ.
Thank you. Number 4. Gavin, what does Bastiat say will be the fate of those who criticize the existing law or the government?
They will be mocked, usually.
Okay, they will be mocked, they will be denounced, they will be rejected as a subversive. What's a subversive? Subversive is the word that he used. This is on page 9. What does it mean to be subversive? You got that?
It means that like, I don't know what it is. It's like you're trying to undermine the government.
Absolutely, that's exactly right. It means to undermine. It means to cut away at the foundation. It means to cause it to maybe to fall over. Okay? If something is subversive, okay, subversive is one of those things that the government hates more than anything else. If anything threatens the government, threatens their existence, they hate it. They'll go after it with a passion like you can't believe. But subversive means that you're saying something to incite popular disfavor, people that are dissatisfied with the government. They think the government is crooked or taking advantage of them, doing something they should not do. That's subversive, okay? And if you're subversive, guess what the government is going to do? They're going to come around and say, well, what was it that the Sanhedrin and the officers of the law of the Jews were saying to Peter? He was being subversive. He was teaching them that they should listen to the gospel of Jesus Christ instead of listen to the old law and the rule by the Sanhedrin. And they did not like that. That's the whole reason Jesus was killed. He was subversive. He was convincing people not to listen and believe in that government anymore. They did not like that. And that's exactly how they will react when they are threatened that way. Okay, very good. Next is number 5. Yes or no? Is a law necessarily just because it's a law? And who am I up to? Kennedy.
No, it is not.
It is not law, and that's what Bastiat said. He said just because people get the idea that just because somebody made a law, it must be just because they made it a law, right? He says, but no, it's not. You've got to be able to see when a law is actually, instead of just, it's actually an instrument of injustice. And that means we need to understand what is justice. We'll have to come back to that concept and talk to you about that later. Number 6 to Dylan. What does the franchise mean?
Everyone has a right.
A right for what?
What they want.
Everyone has a right to what they want? I want pancakes.
To work for what they want.
Everyone has a right to work for what they want. You're not quite exactly hitting that nail on the head. That's kind of hitting on the side. Franchise has a specific meaning when we're talking about politics. What is the franchise? Somebody help us out here.
Are we on number 6?
We're on number 6. Carson, go for it.
Any special right or privilege granted by a government?
Any special right or privilege granted by a government. That's technically a correct answer. That's not how Bastiat is using the word. And the way Bastiat is using word fits into your definition, but doesn't really tell us what you're talking about. What special right is he talking about when he's talking about the franchise? What special right is granted by the government?
The right to legalize plunder.
The right to legalize plunder by what means?
The government.
By voting.
By voting. There you go. Thank you. The franchise means to be able to vote. It's a special right. It's a privilege granted by the government. The government comes around and says, you can vote, you can't. You can vote, you can't. And back in Bastia today, who were the people who could not vote?
Girls, women, whatever.
Girls couldn't vote. Yes, okay. You're a man, we like men. You can vote. You're a woman, you don't know nothing. You're an idiot. You can't vote. Okay, what about children? Can children vote?
No.
No, you guys are idiots. You can't vote. Okay, and so he said you had 3/4 of the people who couldn't vote. And who was telling them that they couldn't vote? 1/4 of the people was telling 3/4 of the people they couldn't vote. Well, what's up with that? Okay, that kind of seems contrary, but that's exactly what he said. He said, the people who vote are the people who get to tell everybody else how much money we're going to take away from them. Now you see why voting was such a huge, important thing. You know, you ever heard of Servant Susan B. Anthony that wanted to make women be able to vote in America? She said, look, they're passing all these laws and we don't even get a chance to say anything about it. We want to be able to vote. Okay, isn't that exactly what Bastiat predicted? When you have the power to abuse other people with the law, everybody is going to want to vote. Everybody's going to think voting is the most important thing, because this is how we can abuse other people, is by our votes. Okay? Do you remember back during the Vietnam War, all the 18-year-olds were being drafted to go to fight and die and get shot at over in Vietnam? And they weren't allowed to vote. And so they got all the students on the college campuses around and said, look, you're going to take us and send us over across the ocean and shoot bullets at us, and we don't even get a vote. We want to vote. We want to vote. And so what did the government finally have to do? They said, okay, fine, we'll let you vote. And then they all started voting for anybody who wouldn't send them over there to get shot at. It was the only way they had to defend themselves was to vote. Okay? That's why voting is so important when you have corrupted law. Okay? So, the franchise number 6. Number 7. What does suffrage mean?
What is the definition for 6?
The right to vote. Number 6 is the right to vote. Yes, it is a special privilege granted by the government, but in this case we're talking about the right to vote is called the franchise.
So that was wrong.
It was half wrong, Carson.
So do 0.5%.
Yeah, give you 0.5% for that.
At least I get percentage.
Yeah. Okay. Number 7, what does suffrage mean? Who am I up to? Ethan?
The right to vote.
Suffrage means the right to vote. Exactly correct. It's another word for the same thing. How many? It's no different. Suffrage is the right to vote. How many of you remember the movie Mary Poppins?
I've never seen that, but I have it.
Okay, your homework is to go watch the movie.
My VCR doesn't work.
Isn't suffrage just rights, like any right?
No, suffrage means specifically the right to vote. Okay, in Mary Poppins, there's a scene where the lady, what's her name? Mrs.
Poppins.
No, not Mary Poppins, the wife of the man in the house. The wife of the banker. Mrs. Banks. Yeah, Mrs. Banks. She is a suffragette. Okay? That's a female version of someone who is suffraging. She's out there leading the protest. She wants women to be able to vote because they don't have the right to vote. They don't have the power to make these laws. And so she's out there singing, Sister Suffragette, we want to get together and we want to vote. That's so important to us. That's what we're giving our life for. We're going to lay down on the railroad tracks and let the train run over us if you don't let us vote. Okay? Sister Suffragette is in the movie, Mary Poppins. Carson, you've had a deprived childhood. You never watched that movie. I can't believe it. Better go watch it. Okay, I only see 6 people on my screen. I'm down. Who's here that I haven't called on yet? Jaquel, I think you're in there. Here's your question. Ning Yan's there. She answered a question. Why would restricting law to its proper function eliminate quarrels about suffrage, about who could vote and who couldn't vote? Jaquel, have you got an answer for me on that one?
I wrote down that if the law was used properly, everyone's interest in the law would be the same. Everyone's interest would be the same. I think that's a good answer. Here's what Bastiat said on page 13 in my book. He said, if the law was restricted to its proper function, no one who could vote could provide any inconvenience to someone who could not vote. Okay? They could not inconvenience anybody who could not vote. Okay? Wouldn't that be wonderful? It would be impossible for you to hurt somebody with your vote. You couldn't take away their money. You couldn't restrict the use of their property. You couldn't do anything to them by voting. Okay? And if that was the case, who would care who's going to be the president? I don't care. Let Joe Schmo be the president. He can't hurt me. I absolutely don't need to spend any time whatsoever watching debates on TV to decide who should be my president, because he can't hurt me. Okay? I can ignore him and I don't care. Okay? That's the whole thing about politics and voting. They say politics is the entertainment division of the war and military industrial complex. If you didn't think that was funny, go ask your dad.
Ha ha ha.
Okay. Number 9. Is there anybody else in this classroom I haven't called on yet? Okay, then I'm going to the peanut gallery. Ada, what is the one cause of conflict in society?
The law diverted from its true purpose, that it may violate property and to protect itself from plunder by use.
Could all of you hear her answer?
No,
She gave me a very good answer, a very good correct answer, but it was very long and it was very quiet. I'll tell you the short answer, which is the same answer she gave me. Legalized plunder. Okay? She gave us a long definition where the law has been perverted from its proper use into the use of blah, 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 blah. The answer is legalized plunder. Okay? Legalized plunder. Okay, and number 10, Annalie, I think you know the answer to this question. What are the 2 issues in the United States that Bastiat predicted could result in the ruin of the Union of the States?
Slavery and tariffs.
Slavery and tariffs. That was on the question last week, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Whoa, freebie. Ask you the same question twice. Okay, number 11. Why is slavery a violation of liberty by law? Ning Yan, I'm back up to you.
It takes away people's liberty.
Slavery definitely takes away a liberty, but why is it done by law?
So that everyone has to follow it.
You cannot have slavery if you don't have a law that makes it legal. The law has to protect slavery. If I want to make you my slave and bring you to my house and mow my grass every week and not pay you any money, what can be done about that? You can say, wait a minute, I don't want to mow your grass and not get paid. I'm going to call the police and they're going to make me so I don't have to mow your grass, right? Right, because we have a law that says I can't make you do stuff without paying you if you don't want to do it. Slavery has to be protected by the law,
or has to be required by the law in order to exist. Okay, because if everybody doesn't agree that there should be slavery, a slave can't appeal to law. Back in the time in the United States, when there was legalized slavery, what if a slave went into the court and said, excuse me, I'm here to petition the court for my freedom. I don't want to be a slave anymore. And what did the court say?
Nothing.
Get out of here. You can't say that. You can't come in here. You're a slave. Get out. Okay? The law did not protect slaves. The law protected slave owners. The law was being used to take away take away life, liberty, and property. Okay? The law has to protect it in order for it to exist. Number 12, Carson, why is a protective tariff a violation of property by law?
The law has come to be an instrument of injustice.
Well, what's that got to do with protective tariffs? What is protective tariff?
Oh, kind of like, my mom helped me with this, so she said like it would also relate to number 11, why is slavery a violation of liberty by law?
It does relate, but it's a different example. What is a protective tariff? Okay, help us out. Open to everybody. What is a protective tariff? Ada, what's a protective tariff?
It protects against competition from foreign people.
Now say that again, Kennedy.
It protects companies here in America from foreign competition.
And how does it do that?
Limits foreign competition here in America.
By the law, right?
Yeah, by law.
Okay, so we're going to pass a law that says you want to make a car over in Japan and bring it to America? You can't do that. You can't bring Japanese cars into America. America's the greatest country in the world. We want to drive the greatest cars in the world. We're only driving American-made cars. Detroit is the car maker of the world. Ford, GM, Chrysler, these are American cars. You want to drive a car? Drive an American car. Get that Japanese crap out of here. Or that German crap, you know what? You want to drive a BMW? You want to drive a Mercedes? Don't you know those are made in Germany? Get them out of here. Okay? We use the law to force American people to pay money that if they want to have a car, they have to pay more money for an American car. Okay? Now that's just one example. The protective tariff is not usually a law that prohibits imports. It's simply a law that makes them more expensive. Okay? Last week we talked about sugar. Okay? Do you know that it's much cheaper to make sugar out of sugar cane, than it is out of beets? It's much cheaper. And the sugar tastes better, by the way. Tastes better. But the people that make sugar out of beets would lose their livelihood if there was all of this cheap sugar that could come into our country. They would lose their farm. They would have to learn to grow something else besides sugar beets. And we can't have that. And so what are we going to do? We're going to pass a law that says you can't bring cheap sugar here that's made from sugar cane over in Hawaii or Cuba or someplace and let American people have cheap sugar. They have to buy expensive sugar that is made in America, because America is the greatest country in the world and we have the best sugar in the world. And it's made from sugar beets, not sugar cane. Okay? That is a protective tariff. And by passing that law, I'm taking a little bit of money out of everybody's pocket who goes to the grocery store and buys Cheerios. No, wait a minute. Who buys Fruit Loops? You buy Fruit Loops, you have to pay extra money for the Fruit Loops because some of that money has to go to these American sugar beet farmers. We have to protect them from this cheap foreign sugar competition. Okay? That's the idea. I'm using a law to violate the property of the people that want to buy Fruit Loops. You get it?
Yeah.
Okay. Raise your hand if you don't get it. All right. All right. Number 13. And I think I am up to Adriana. What are the two kinds of plunder?
Legal and illegal. That's how you say it?
Yes, that's right. Legal plunder and illegal plunder. And which kind of plunder do we prefer?
Legal.
We prefer legal plunder if we have to choose, but we'd rather not have any plunder at all, right? Okay, number 14, Gavin. Why is it impossible to use the law to combat socialism?
Because law is the socialist weapon.
Because socialism is established by law. You can't use the law to defend something that the law created. Either the law creates it and sustains it, or the law prevents it, but you can't use it because socialism is legal plunder, which is established by the law. Okay, and this was a big deal about Bernie Sanders' campaign. Bernie Sanders said, we're going to make free college for everybody. Well, how do you make free college? All the college students, they went out and voted and protested, and they said, yeah, forgive our college loans. We don't want to have to pay money for college. We want to go to college free. Where does free college come from? Kennedy. It comes from all those property taxes, right? Or it comes from the taxes we take away from people.
Good for my mom.
People away. We're going to take money away from people, and we're going to give it to the college professors so they can teach the kids. Either that, or we're going to make the college professors into slaves, and we're going to say, you can't quit your job, and you have to teach these kids, and you have to do it for this amount of money. You no longer have the right to demand and negotiate what your salary should be. You're going to have to do it for how much we tell you. We're going to make you into a slave. Okay? That's socialism. It can only exist if it's done by the law. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Isn't this law a neat little thing? Okay, number 15. How can you identify legal plunder? This is an important definition that I want you all to get correct and to remember. And I'm up to Kennedy Mallory. What's the how do you identify legal plunder?
If the government does something that you yourself could not legally do.
Okay, that's a good answer. I'll give you credit for that, but that's not the answer that Bastiat said. He said, see, if the law takes something away from some people, stuff that belongs to them, the law takes it away from them and gives it to other people to whom it does not belong. Okay? That's the answer I want you to remember. When you see the law that takes stuff or money away from some people that belongs to them, and it gives it to other people that to whom it does not belong, that is legal plunder. Okay? Got it? Number 16, I'm up to Dylan. What's an acquired right?
Voting?
Voting is an example of an acquired right. When you were born, did God grant you the right to vote? No, He did not. Okay, that is not an inalienable right. That is a right that comes from government. An acquired right is a right that is granted by government, not by God or not by nature. Okay, if you're a sugar beet farmer and you have the right to get more money for your sugar beets than what the market would provide, where does that right come from? It comes from the government. When you were born a sugar beet farmer, God did not say you have the right to get extra money for your sugar beets. Okay, that's the difference between an acquired right and a natural right. Okay, put that in your notes. An acquired right versus a natural right. A natural right is a right that comes by virtue of your nature. It's by virtue of the fact that you're a human being. You are a thing to act, not to be acted upon. You have rights that come to you because you are alive. Okay, and those rights come from God. They are called natural rights. Okay, 17, there's 3 resolutions to the question of legal plunder. Ethan, what did you come up with on that?
The few plunder many, everybody plunders everybody, nobody plunders anybody.
Exactly right, page 19. And Bastiat calls those limited plunder, universal plunder, or no plunder. Okay, so everybody plunders everybody, the few plunder the many, or nobody plunders anybody. Okay, and which of those three solutions, Jaquel, does Bastiat suggest would be the best solution?
C, no plunder.
C, no plunder, good. Number 19, I'm up to Ada. Why does Bastiat defy anyone to use the law to accomplish anything except protecting the rights of everyone?
Because all forms are equal and unjustifiable.
Because all what?
All of the forms of the rights, like all of the.
Okay, when I say use the law to accomplish anything except protecting life, liberty, and property. Okay, what would be an example of using the law when I'm not using it to protect life, liberty, and property? Like what?
Plunder. When you're not.
Well, plunder, yes, that would be an example of that, but plunder for what? Why would I be plundering somebody and I'm not protecting them? I'm taking their stuff away, and what am I doing with their stuff? Like, I'm educating people, or I'm taking care of the homeless, or I'm providing health care and medicine for the old people, okay? I'm doing nice things for people. If I'm using the law, Bastiat says, if you use the law to help people and do nice people, then at the same time, you are injuring people, damaging people, hurting people, okay? He says you can either protect them or you can hurt them, but you can't do both. They are mutually exclusive. And write that term down on your notes, mutually exclusive. That means you can't have your cake and eat it too. Did you ever hear that? I want this cake. I want to have this cake. I love looking at it. I love holding it in my hands. I love smelling it. But you know what? I want to eat it. But what happens if I eat it? It's going to be gone. I can't eat it. I can't have it if I eat it. And if I want to have it, I can't eat it. Do you get it? You can't have your cake and eat it too. That means mutually exclusive. You can do one or the other, but you can't do both, because if you do one, that destroys the other. Okay? And that's what Bastiat says about the law. You can help people with the law, but if you do that, you destroy the function of law. The only thing you can do is protect life, liberty, and property. And if you're going to protect it, you can protect it. But if you're going to try to help people and be nice and educate them and put them in hospitals, then you're going to destroy the protection. Okay? All right.
Luke Eager?
Yes.
So I wrote down for that question, I said if they do, they will pervert the law, turning might against right. Is that a correct answer or not?
Yes, that's right. If they try to do nice things, they're going to pervert the law. And they're going to say, because we are strong, we are going to do what is not right. We have the power, so we are going to use the power, and we are going to do bad stuff. That is might against right. Okay? Pretty poetic, isn't it? Okay, year. And number 20. What is the contradiction between law providing justice and philanthropy? This is the same question, just seeing if you know the definition of the words. Philanthropy means being nice, doing good things for people. Okay, if I use the law to be nice and do good things for people, I am eating my cake. And you cannot eat your cake if you want to have it. Okay? Well, doggone it. I did not have an opportunity to get onto the next thing I needed to cover with you today. And our time is totally gone. Well, question, Carson?
Number 19, I don't know if I got it right, but I just want to make sure. I put it's illogical to use the law for any other purpose to protect its citizens. Law is organized justice.
It's not because it's illogical. It's physically impossible. Law is the use of force. Law is the use of violence. I'm going to use violence and force to accomplish something nice. Now, how does that work? Okay, I'm going to give this guy a pill because he's sick, but I'm going to beat this guy up and steal his money to do it. Okay, so what's the point of that? Okay, in other words, I'm going to destroy right with might to do something good. There's no morality in that. There's no virtue in that. Law is force, and the use of force to organize anything except preventing injustice results in a perversion of the law. Okay?
So if I put that it was legalized plunder, would that be incorrect?
That's the bottom line. If I try to use the law for anything except protecting life, liberty, and property, it becomes legalized plunder. Yes, so that's a correct answer. That's the right idea. Okay, our time is up. I'm going to quit right now. Like I said, I got a really cool video I'm going to show you, but I got to have more than 2 minutes to do it. So we're gonna quit right here and be done for today. And
What's our assignment?
your assignment. Oh yes, assignment is page 50.
We're supposed to read to page 50?
Up to page 50 in the law.
Okay.
Dude.
Hey, how many pages are in the whole book?
84 pages, I think.
Are you going to have to read all of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, so get over it. Up to page 50 for next week, and I'll send you out the quiz on Wednesday. Okay? I love seeing you guys. You look really smart and really great, and I can tell you're getting a lot smarter as a result of coming to this class.
I don't think I am. I have lots of catching up to do.
Hang in there. I think you will. Okay, have a great day, guys. We'll see you next week.
Okay.
Brother,